Hi, everyone, and welcome to our climate anxiety, climate grief call. I'm really happy to welcome Meg Mattingly to join us tonight. Meg has been consulting with us as a Druid order. So one of the things that we began seeing mentors and various volunteers is, AODA, particularly of all the Druid orders, is a we're very close to nature. We're in nature every day. We're observing and we're interacting. And as climate change has gotten more significant, we have noticed the issue where more and more of us are starting to struggle with climate anxiety, with climate grief, to the point where some people are like, I don't even know if I want to go outside anymore. So we decided to hire a professional to help us navigate this as an organization. So back in November, we had a training for our leadership, everyone who volunteers for AODA. And today's call is for everyone. And we are recording this for members who cannot have it. The final thing that we will be offering is we're going to be including some information on climate and climate grief and all of those things in our new candidate guide and also on our website. So that's essentially where we're going. And so without further delay, I will go ahead and turn it over to Meg.
Thanks so much, all. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. Awesome. Okay. All right, y'all. So as we get started today, oh, why is this not letting me go to the next page? There we go. All right, before we begin, I just want to go over a few things. I encourage you guys to have something to write with or jot down your thoughts and notes. There's a lot of interaction through this workshop. Because there's so many of us, we're not going to necessarily be able to verbally be participating until the very end, but I really encourage you to use the chat to engage. But also there's a lot of questions, there's a lot of prompts. And so if it feels necessary or kind of part of how you process, have something close by that you can write down things. So I encourage you to have something to drink or eat, make sure that you're taking care of yourself, that you feel cozy, that you're in comfy clothes, all of that. I know it's late for a lot of us, depending on time zone. But yeah, that's priority for sure. Also, just want to name the choice around participation. Again, please utilize the chat as much as you want. There's a lot of us in here, and so I won't necessarily be able to answer everyone's question or even just read out their comments or answers to the questions. But I hope as kind of creating community via virtual Zoom, that's also a way that you can see what other people are feeling or experiencing. And so again, there's no forcing of anyone to write things in there. But yeah, just kind of checking in with yourself. Also, optional camera use. Again, I'm going to have the screen up most of the time until the end, but please just take care of if it's comfortable or not to have your camera on. Dana already went over the filming part of this. And then again, just please prioritize yourself in this. We'll be touching on topics that might trigger things in you. We're all navigating this in different ways, in different waves of feelings. Take breaks if you need to, all of that. And I also just want to name that this workshop's not about coming to a solution at the end. It's not about everything being tied up nice in a bow, but rather it's about providing more resources, support, space around this complex topic together. All right. So a little bit about me. As Dana said, my name's Meg Mattingly. I live in Austin, Texas, and I'm a LPC, a licensed professional counselor. Before becoming a therapist, I pursued jobs where I was always trying to find a way to be outside. That was always sort of my interest. My undergrad is in recreation parks and tourism. So I've taught outdoor education. I worked at treatment centers. I taught youth about farming and leadership, built school gardens. And so, yeah, just really moving into this work as a therapist, have always continued to try to find ways to connect with Mother Nature in my work. Yeah, I feel like it's a kind of a driving force as my work as a therapist. So just a little bit about my practice. I own my own practice here in Austin called Willow Tree Collective. I work with clients in a variety of areas, but these are sort of four of the main areas I I do work with clients around identity exploration, life transitions, religious trauma, spiritual exploration, and then kind of this new recent branch of my practice that is kind of why I'm here is the emphasis on eco-anxiety and climate distress. So it's been really cool. This is in the last year of really digging into this from my own personal work around this, and really starting to see this more with my clients and wanting to provide a space of support around that. So if we can go ahead, again, we're going to utilize the chat as much as we want. Go ahead and write your name and location in the chat, just so we can kind of all see where we are, where we're coming from. Yeah, that would be great. And it'd be fun for me to see kind of representation of where everyone's at. Canada, Arkansas, Michigan, Pennsylvania, Maryland, Ohio, North Carolina, Wisconsin, California, Pennsylvania, West Virginia, Kansas, Illinois, Tennessee, New York. Awesome. So cool. And again, I think I named this, but I might not always get to everyone's answer, but please keep putting it in there. I want y'all to be able to see that for yourselves, and where everyone's at. All right, so throughout, I'm gonna have these chat questions just to pose, to get us thinking, to get us kind of in this mindset. So I'd love to just hear, and just as a reminder, keeping these succinct as possible. You may have so much to say, and I love that. Maybe have that, keep that for your own notes, but in a succinct way. If you feel moved to answer these questions, what are you hoping to leave with tonight, or what brought you here? And again, we can just keep these for the chats at this time. We'll have more conversation as a group later. Hoping to feel there are others feeling the losses with the change, looking for real solutions, resources, coming to terms with what I'm seeing around me, with skills to help navigate feelings, learning resources, some support for times of anxiety. New member, just saw this as a great way to participate. Awesome. Yeah, and again, please feel free as we move on to keep answering those questions so that we can all kind of participate in that as well. All right, so what we're going to cover tonight, we're going to really just initially start with defining what is climate distress. I use the word climate distress. There's an umbrella of that, and we'll go into that just to kind of holistically talk about this topic, and then just address what are we experiencing individually? What does support look like? What do we need? And then we'll end our time tonight kind of with action and practice. All right, so climate distress, what are we talking about? So, as we all know, climate change is impacting individuals, communities at a growing rate. I feel it's really important to name in this work that the loss of land, the change of land, is something that many folks, especially Indigenous communities and people of color, have been experiencing for a long time. That loss of land, place, security. However, this is not a new thing. There is a growing movement within the mental health community to acknowledge and support folks experiencing climate change and its impact, which I'm really hopeful about, that there's such an integration, or there needs to be more of an integration, and I'm seeing that, of our mental health crisis and climate change, because it impacts so much of our being, of our daily life. So some of the names that are being used to kind of talk about climate distress, and you may see some of these interchange, they all are defined a little different, but tonight I'm gonna mainly just be using climate distress for the ease of this conversation. But climate anxiety, climate distress, eco-anxiety, eco-grief, and solastalgia. I wanted to talk about solastalgia just for a minute because I find it really fascinating that this is a newer term that was created by a professor philosopher, Glenn Albert. I think I'm saying his last name right. But he defines it as, and I wanted to make sure that I got this right, so I'm going to read it, as the pain or distress caused by the ongoing loss of solace and the sense of desolation connected to the present state of one's home or territory, manifests as an attack on one's sense of place. So I find this really important to name that because of what we're facing, there are new words being created to define this thing that we are experiencing, this loss of land, this loss of place. So some of the global impacts of climate change that we're seeing is loss of community and home, loss of place, connection and exploration, loss of food and water access, loss of flora and fauna, loss of culture, loss of stability, threat to spiritual practice and growth, increases in feelings of anxiety, hopelessness, overwhelm, fear, sadness, anger, apathy, etc. So in the chat, I'm wondering, and I know I kind of went through that, I can go back in the slide, but is there anything that you would add to the list of the impacts of climate change? Homesickness, difficulties getting food, fuel, loss of tradition around snow. Yeah. Mountaintop removal, health for sure. Yeah, grief around our kids. Yeah, what the world will be like for them. Loss of sacred places, loss of species. More frequent big storms, loss of hope for the future. Yeah, thank y'all for sharing. So again, this isn't an extensive list, but to go over kind of what we're seeing, what I'm seeing specifically, what my colleagues are seeing, the impacts on our mental health based connected to climate change. So anxiety, I think it's important to, I am one, I guess how I practice or how I see things is not everything needs to be pathologized. So I think anxiety is a great example of that, that anxiety is a normal emotion that when we're reacting to a threat that we feel. So that anxiety that we're carrying in our bodies around all these things that we're talking about, loss of place, fear of, things shifting, et cetera, et cetera. Depression can result from that sense of loss, that powerlessness, overwhelm, and just feeling, that stuckness. PTSD, I think, is something it's important to name when we're talking about post traumatic stress disorder, but also pre-traumatic stress disorder, especially when coming to folks who have personally gone through great natural disasters, hurricanes, floods, fires, wildfires, droughts. Those experiences, when we deal with that can continue to live in our body if we have experienced something like that. Or on the other side of that fear that's going to happen to us. We see that happening around us. So that's something that we're definitely seeing. And just that overall hopelessness, saturated with feelings of dread, what's the point, lack of possibility or belief that things can change. I found this really interesting. This was taken from Force of Nature is an organization in the UK. So this is from a 2021 report that in 2019 alone, Oxford Language reported a 4,290% increase in the use of word eco-anxiety, highlighting a growing interest in mental health impacts related to climate and environmental change. And so that was 4 years ago, that really high increase in this is language that we're using now. We're trying to understand what we're experiencing, what's going on, and that we're seeing that this word is used more, which is, to me, tells me that there's an increase in that feeling that people are having. So I want to get in to kind of what's our own experience with this. So kind of starting with what do you notice? How do you personally navigate and respond to your climate distress? I'm not trying to, for the sake of this presentation, I'm simplifying it, but I know it is much more expansive than just fitting into this nice little box of fight, flight, freeze. But I'm using this just kind of as a way to keep it contained for the sake of this process. But I thought this was a helpful way to kind of think through maybe where we go in places of stress or when we feel overwhelmed. And so if we think about when our body is responding to threat, when our frontal cortex kind of shuts down, we go into that fight, flight, or freeze mode. And so I think this could show up sometimes when we're dealing with high levels of distress or anxiety around climate change. So for some of us, we might go to that fight place, meaning that we're kind of always in that fight. It's never enough the work we're doing. We have guilt around not doing more. We're always pushing forward into the cause, no matter the personal consequences. This can really lead to burnout. So it's just that, like, if I'm not doing it, who's going to do it? That taking that on fully of self, of like, I have to keep going. And then we've got flight, where we're just so overwhelmed by the issues, we feel safest to run away or ignore. What can I really do in this? Or the freeze, where we face paralysis just with the severity of the crisis, that disconnection, that despondent, that just feeling dissociated from the situation. So in the chat, do any of these resonate with you? And how does it show up for you? And I can go back. And if this is the language that doesn't connect with you, feel free to kind of write, again, in short little blurbs, kind of where you go. I saw someone said, I definitely in freeze mode. Right, someone saying the fight response. Yeah, swinging back and forth, totally. Yeah, we're not stuck in one. It's not binary. It's very fluid for sure. Guilt to freeze, fight, freeze, yeah. Freeze. Mm-hmm. Going between fight and flight, withdrawal, paralysis, yeah, despair, hope, energizes. Yeah, thank y'all. Keep sharing for sure. And please, wow, we have a lot of people responding. I love that. So please feel free to read what everyone's sharing. Yeah, I think I'm seeing a lot of the theme of like people going from one to the other. We don't live in just one for sure. And sometimes it's outside of this zone as well. So I want us to kind of move on to needs and support. So I want us to really slow down with that question. Something that I learned, I think, when I was doing the leadership one, and I came back and was like, I want to expand on this a little bit more, was focusing on what need is. I see this so much in my work with individual clients that sometimes when I ask the simple question of like, well, what do you actually need? There's like a freezing. I think we're not always connected to our needs, or we have some interesting stories around needs. Generally speaking, I think sometimes we can associate needs with being needy, or if we have needs, then that can make us weak, or it's scary to depend on others or to name that. And so I wanted to pause a little bit or just slow down on how do we even access what we need around this. So the first thing that when we are kind of in that place of overwhelm and we're just like, I don't even know what I need. And then I'm going between fight and freeze mode, or I'm so overwhelmed. The first thing always is to take a breath, to take a deep inhale, a deep exhale. There's so many great resources out there about breathing techniques. Two very simple ones that I like to use and come back to is square breathing, that when we are finding ourselves, our heartbeats really fast, our minds racing. We're in that place, we're flooded. Something that's simple breathing, where we can either use our finger to create a box, or we can do it mentally. But to inhale for 4, creating a line. 2, 3, 4. Exhale. 2, 3, 4. Inhale. 2, 3, 4. Exhale. 2, 3, 4. And continuing that. Sometimes the act of it is also helpful. If you're in a public space, maybe that feels a little too vulnerable to be making squares in the air around other people. But if you're alone, then that's helpful to do that. Another one that can be helpful is, again, a counting one, where we inhale for 4, 2, 3, 4. Exhale for 8, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Really trying to bring our heart rate down. Because so much of what happens when we get in that fight, flight, or freeze, we get in that overwhelmed state, our brain, it's like we're cutting off the oxygen to our brain. Our frontal cortex isn't working anymore. It's shut down. We're really working from back here, kind of our reptilian brain. Bringing breath back in helps us to come back online with ourselves. The next thing is pausing. After taking that breath, pause. Slowing down and pausing before acting. I think that also is such a hard thing to do, because there's an issue and we need to solve it, responsive. And so pausing, getting curious, what is actually going on here? What is the need? Where's all this coming from? What would feel good in the moment? And letting that kind of wash over us for a second, and then identifying and acting. So on the next slide I'm about to share, I have an extensive list, and I can also share this in our resources that I'll kind of have for all of you. Excuse me. But it's from the Nonviolent Communication, I was going to say not company, organization, which I think is great, just really helping us to figure out what we need and what we feel. And so sitting again, what are we needing at this moment? And so they break down kind of the different needs we have: autonomy, connection, meaning, peace, physical well-being, play. And how do we meet this need? So again, I know this is small, but I just wanted to include this as just kind of a reference point. And again, I'm happy to share this with the group later on, but really allowing us to sit with that. What are we actually needing right now? Connection is the one that I kind of always come back to, especially in this work when we're talking about climate distress. It can feel so isolating. And I think connection is a huge one, of knowing we're not alone, reaching out to others, etc. So I want us to, I'm kind of checking time, and I think we're still good. So I'd like for us to kind of take a minute and run through an activity together. This is an individual activity. It's similar to kind of what I was just talking about, but different. This is a more structured thing that was just sort of setting up how we actually identify what we need. So I'm not sure if many of y'all are familiar with Tara Brach, but she's a Buddhist teacher. She has incredible resources out there. She's written several books, Radical Self-Compassion. Wait, is that her? No, I'm getting her mixed up with someone else. Hold on. That's someone else, sorry. But she talks about radical, that might be her. Anyway, sorry, I'm having a brain freeze. But her work is amazing and super helpful. And so what I was gonna recommend is that we take a few minutes to practice rain. Rain is something that she came up with as a way to check in with ourselves, to bring in, it is her, that is, she wrote Radical Self-Compassion. I just remembered. To come in and make sure that we're taking care of ourselves. So what I'm going to invite us to do is, again, we are not meeting all together. And so I really want you to pull on something that feels safe to pull on, that it's not too deep. It could be something that annoyed you today, something you felt kind of flustered by. it can be in the near recent past or something that is easy to pull on. I would recommend not going to something that feels really, really painful, because again, this is just sort of a practice, isn't it? We don't really have the space to create a lot of support around this. This is more just to get into the mindset of it. But what rain does is it allows us to bring some self-compassion when we are feeling that overwhelm. And so as you can read what RAIN stands for, it's recognizing what's happening, allowing the experience to be there just as it is. We're not trying to fix it. We're not trying to downplay it. We're just allowing it to be. We're investigating with interest and care, we're being curious about it. And then we're nurturing with self-compassion for ourselves of what we kind of need in that moment. Usually this is used like in the moment. So this is, again, a little bit of, it is just a practice. This is something that you would maybe refer to right after an experience. But again, for the sake of this, we're going to just kind of pretend or play with this a little bit. So what I'm going to do, radical acceptance, that's what it is. Yes. Thank you, David. But what we're going to do is I'm going to set a timer for 3 minutes. And so I know that no one's, we're right now my screen share, so faces shouldn't be seen anyway. But if you want to turn off your camera, if you have it on, or if you just want to find a quiet space, close your eyes. But in a minute, I'll just say go. And I want us to just practice what it's like to allow for recognizing what happened, allow the experience to be there just as it is, investigate with interest and care, and nurture with self-compassion. Cool. Okay, so I'm setting a timer and I'll let you know when it's off. All right, y'all. I know that was kind of quick, maybe for some of y'all that was long. I got a question and I really appreciate it in the chat. I need examples of nurture with self-compassion. I'm not sure I understand what that means. Thank you for that. And I apologize for not clarifying that more. I think I'm trying to get a lot of stuff in this workshop, but I am going to have a handout for this that is more in depth of what that means. But just for the context of our conversation here, nurturing with self-compassion, I think, is providing a space of non-judgment. I think sometimes that can be hard for us when maybe a judgmental voice is so present, like that just feels like maybe that's our voice. And so it can be challenging, I think, to know what does it even mean to be nurturing to ourselves, or what does it mean to show compassion to ourselves? And I'm just generally speaking here. Maybe some of us that's not as challenging. And I think I'm pulling also from my work with my clients that I see. That's bringing in, let's say, for example, I'll use, let's say my thing I brought up was I lost my temper in traffic today. And I started like road raging around me. I was really upset. And part of what my process might be is recognizing what's happening. Like, oh, I am pissed off. I am so angry right now. I went from 0 to 100 in like 2 seconds, allowing the experience to be there just as it is. Wow, I'm holding a lot of anger in my body. I'm recognizing that I'm yelling at other people, or I'm shaking my fist. I gave someone the finger. Investigate with interest and care. That might be, wow, you know, I had a really hard day today and I miss my family, and I think I just really want to be home and get hugs from them. And then the nurturing with self-compassion might be, oh, you know what? I am human. I had a bad day. This doesn't define me. I'm not an angry person. I'm learning how to deal with my road rage. And today, maybe I slipped up a little bit. That was a very general example. I don't know if that's helpful. Yeah, so why is it being so, there we go. So yeah, I see some of y'all already adding to the chat. That's awesome. But yeah, what came up for you? What was helpful? Could you practice this in the future? Oh, I love that. I talk to myself the way I might comfort one of my kids. Yeah, I think that's a great way to think about self-compassion. Allowing yourself the grace to feel what you need to feel without beating yourself up for it. Totally. Not getting mad at yourself for having feelings. Not judging myself for little things. It's difficult to learn, do. Yeah. Asking yourself what that hurt, pain, suffering part of yourself needs in the moment. Yeah, letting go of the judgment, how powerful that can be. Letting go of the judgment of ourselves, how that can open up doors within ourselves, can create more connection, I think. At allow, I was amazed how much tension drained from my body. Yeah. Thank y'all so much for sharing all this. This is awesome. Yeah, please feel free to keep naming that. I'm wondering, just to kind of answer that last one, could you see this? Could you practice this in the future? Could you see this being a helpful tool to pull on when you are in that place of overwhelm, or when you are kind of judging yourself for feelings that you're having? Say a yes. And I feel like a broken record. I keep saying this. I know I'm covering a lot of stuff. I'm going to share this slideshow, this presentation as well, along with what Dana was talking about, some of the resources on the website and new member packets. But there's some things in here, some kind of PDFs that are a part of this that I'm also happy to kind of package together with this, because I know it's a lot of information. I hope that as we continue to go through this, that you are allowing it to just wash over you, and that you can kind of come back to this when there's more space and kind of sit with things. Because again, I know this is like we're touching on a lot of things in a short amount of time. I'm saying yes, good process to use, yes. Someone's using rain in their discussion at work. That's awesome. During meditation. Yeah, it's a super simple tool, but I find it helpful. And again, it's about practicing. It's not about it being perfect or getting it right, but it's about how to incorporate more and more ways of taking care of ourselves, of making space for our humanness. And then I just kind of talking about general support. I just wanted to touch on this briefly before we kind of go into the next part of what are ways that we can be accessing support kind of around this individually. So actually how Dana found me is through the Climate Psychology Alliance. They have a database for climate aware therapists. So if that's something where you're really noticing, wow, I could really use some one-on-one professional support around what I am navigating with my own climate grief or distress. I recommend that as a resource for sure. They've broken up by states and where different therapists are. I also recommend sometimes taking a social media or news break. That I think that can add so much to our overwhelm. It's not about putting our head in the sand, but it's, I think, also about finding what are we filling our minds with always. If we're already feeling this, does it feel good to continue to like pour salt into the wound and just continue to kind of doom scroll? But finding ways, if you are active online or if news is important to you, finding accounts to follow that are hopeful. And again, not in a Pollyanna way, but in a like, there are some badass people doing some really cool stuff out there that are a part of solutions and part of change. And so finding ways to balance out some of that stuff. Getting outside, I know it's not one I really need to tell this group. And I know that is such a part of your practice already. But again, just as a nice reminder, taking breaks to connect to Mother Nature, learn and be open to what she has to teach. I know that for some of us, depending on where we are with our anxiety, sometimes it might be hard to be outside because it's too painful because of what we're seeing, of the solastalgia, because of the change. And so I think just being mindful of that, but I think there's also opportunity there to continue to connect, to show gratitude, if it feels accessible. And then I think kind of what we're going to go into, just this notion of seeking out community. I think it's so great that this group exists and that there's such support and community and a shared belief and way of being that is so powerful. And so I think just leaning into that through this group, through local groups, but isolation can feed our feelings of overwhelm and hopelessness. I mean, it's wild, and I'm not going to remember the statistic specifically off the top of my head, but I think I just read something about how loneliness is even a bigger killer than being a lifelong smoker. Like that isolation, that loneliness, how that impacts us, especially if we're carrying big feelings around anxiety and grief. If we're trying to do it alone, that is, that's damaging, I think. So just finding community and just remembering we can't serve others if we ourselves are not resourced or having our needs met. Again, it's okay to prioritize ourselves so that we can be there for other people. All right. So moving into our action and practice. So I don't know if any of y'all are familiar with Joanna Macy. She's been around for many, many years. I am new to her work, and so I'm sure there's people in this group that are way more knowledgeable about her. I'm quickly falling in love with her and just what she has brought to the world. But anyway, so the next kind of part we're going to move into is based on her work, the work that reconnects, and also active hope. And so a lot of this, most of this is pulled from her. At the end of my presentation, I have a lot of resources listed, and she and I'm blanking on her co-creator, co-writer of Active Hope, but they are so generous with their resources. They offer free trainings, free guides, free resources. So I really strongly encourage that if you're interested in this work and finding more ways to be connected. But I can talk more about that at the end, but just wanted to plug that. So kind of what we're moving into is this idea of practicing active hope. We've touched on kind of our own experiences, how we navigate that. And I want us to move into this notion of what do we do with all of that, right? Like we've talked about how we kind of take care of ourselves in the moment, but how do we continue to feel engaged or fighting against that stuckness? So I'm going to mainly focus tonight on the two components of this, coming from gratitude and honoring our pain for the world. The last two kind of bullet points, seeing with new eyes and going forth, we'll touch on those when we break out into the breakout rooms with our questions, but I want to spend a little bit more time on the first two. And this is just a quote from Joanna Macy that doing this work reminds us that we are larger, stronger, deeper, and more creative than we've grown accustomed to believing. So practicing this work of, she calls it the spiral, and I guess I can go back here, this notion, and I have a graphic later on too, but that it's this fluid spiral motion, meaning that it's not linear, it's not just a circle that it goes back. The more that we engage in this work, the more we answer, kind of come back to these questions or come back to this work, it can look different every time. It's not the same, which I think is a beautiful thing because we're always evolving and changing. All right, and basically this kind of shows the expansiveness of active hope. She just says that it's not wishful thinking, it's not wanting to be rescued by the Lone Ranger or by some savior. Active hope is waking up to the beauty of life, of those on behalf we can act. We belong to this world. The web of life is calling us forth at this time. We have come a long way and we are here to play our part. With active hope, we realize that there are adventures in store, strengths to discover, and comrades to link arms with. Active hope is readiness to engage. Active hope is a readiness to discover the strengths in ourselves and in others, a readiness to discover the reasons for hope and the occasions for love, a readiness to discover the size and strength of our hearts, our quickness of mind, our steadiness of purpose, our own authority, our love for life, the liveliness of our curiosity, the unsuspected deep well of patience and diligence, the keenness of our senses, and our capacity to lead. None of these things can be discovered in an armchair or without risk. It's not the same, me reading it, as Joanna Macy, but, oh, someone found the link. Oh, thanks, Nathan. That's great. Thank you so much. Yeah, I didn't get it. I got it from their Active Hope training. I pulled this video. So thank you so much for finding that. Oh, I love a team. Everyone has strengths they can bring to this. Anyway, so we can watch that later. It's just a sweet kind of, I don't know, message or just image of what active hope is in this process. All right, so that put us back a few minutes, but so it's okay. We're good. We're going to keep moving forward. So I want us to spend just a couple minutes on this notion of coming from gratitude. That's part of the spiral. So some questions that I think are really good prompts to be thinking about gratitude are some things I love about being alive on Earth. A place that was magical to me as a child was. Some things I love doing are. A person who helped me believe in myself. Some things I appreciate about me. Sometimes the barriers we can experience with feeling or allowing for gratitude is the loss of trust. How can I be grateful for this if I've already lost so much? Kind of loss of security, same thing. Consumerism, patriarchy, hopelessness, or overwhelm. How do we access these things when all of this stuff is kind of all around us, or that we feel so overwhelmed by it? So I want to give you just a few minutes to sit with these again. If you have something to write with, if there's a question or two that really stick out to you, feel free to spend a minute or two on just kind of reflecting on that. Maybe if it's hard to answer these, maybe if none of them really resonate with you, maybe take that minute or two to why is it hard? Maybe you're experiencing some of these barriers around accessing gratitude right now. So yeah, let's take just a minute, maybe, just for time's sake. I'll just set a timer. And then once you answer, feel free to put them in the chat if there's anything you feel like sharing or that comes up for you around the prompts, or maybe even the barriers that you're experiencing around accessing gratitude. All right, y'all, if there's anything that comes up, feel free to put it in the chat. I love that I live on a planet that changes in weather and at latitude with seasons. Watching the birds and squirrels visit my feeders. Snowfall in the yard. And we'll have a little bit more time to focus on these questions when we break out into groups. So if I'm going to move on, but again, you'll have access to these questions later too. Okay, we did that. I'm going to skip this one just for time, the video kerfuffle on my end, but I just love this activity. I put this in here of just a way to engage your senses. And again, I think this is a great resource to come back to, but I'm gonna move on from this. This is just kind of a opportunity to experience gratitude in nature and kind of some micro ways. Yeah. I love this quote. I just wanted to share by Robin Wall. Even a wounded world is feeding us. Even a wounded world holds us, giving us moments of wonder and joy. I choose joy over despair, not because I have my head in the sand, but because joy is what the earth gives me daily, and I must return the gift. I am a huge fan of her and her book, Braiding Sweetgrass, and I highly recommend it, but I thought this was a beautiful quote. I just wanted to share it. So I want us to move into honoring our pain for the world. It can feel like a quick turn when we're kind of coming from this place of gratitude. But it's important. It's important in this work to be able to make space for all of that we're feeling, not just the joy, but also how do we honor our pain in a way that doesn't feel consuming or overwhelming. So some of the prompts to think about, and feel free as I'm reading these, feel free to go ahead and jump in to your own work and jotting things down. But when I imagine the world we will leave, those who come after us. It looks like one of my worst fears about the future is, the feeling about this that I carry around with me are. Ways I avoid these feelings include, some ways I can use these feelings are. Excuse me. So barriers to accessing our pain. We may fear that it's too depressing for others. We don't want to burden others. Fear of drowning in feelings. If we let a little bit of this pain in, what will it consume us? Maybe not wanting to be seen as too emotional. Fear of getting stuck in this emotion. If I allow this in, will that be my forever? Fear of what's next. Okay, so I'm feeling this deep pain. Now what do I do with it? And then maybe this isolation with this pain of if I really allow this in, am I going to be alone in this? So again, I'm going to set a timer for just a minute. I know it's not a long time at all, but we'll have a little bit more time in breakout rooms, which is why I'm kind of speeding through this now. But take a minute. If there's anything that jumps out at you from any of this, the prompts or the barriers, feel free to take a minute to just reflect on that and share in the chat. All right, y'all. So again, if there's anything that came up that you want to share in the chat. This is another quote from Active Hope. So the notion that we should steer clear of anything too negative sets up avoidance as a default strategy. Yet, the more we shy away from something we find difficult, the less confident we become that we can deal with it. That stood out to me because I think that really resonated with me of just, sometimes I think when we push things down, we think that we're protecting ourselves, but really it can feel so overwhelming then when we do have to deal with it because we've just been avoiding or shying away from it. And the importance of allowing the reality of like, this is our experience, this is what we're feeling to come in. So this is, I love this, and I'll share this as well, this image of what we're about to move into with the Synod starters in support of Active Hope. This is again representing the spiral. How do we move through this? Again, I love that this is active, the spiral, it's movement, that when we come back to this, when we answer these questions at a different day or time, we're in a different place, so the spiral isn't going to line up perfectly with what it was before. But the questions that we'll focus on tonight, and I'll have it more clear on another slide, but starting with I love, moving into I'd like to think, and then kind of moving into that third, that honoring our pain, looking at the future we're headed into, my concerns include, continuing on with seeing new eyes, facing these concerns, what inspires me is, moving into looking at the future we are headed into, what I deeply hope for is, a part I'd like to play in support of this is, and then the final one, a step a step I'll take forward this in the next week is. So as we're about to move into our breakout rooms, I want you to think on those questions again, answer them where you are. They don't have to be anything but exactly where you are right now. I want a couple things as we break out. I just want to remind you to be respectful of each other's time and the things that are shared. My hope is that in the breakout rooms, they're smaller, so it feels a little bit more intimate, more space for people to be able to talk through stuff. With your leader, y'all can figure out the format to share answers. I think what we're going to gear towards, and y'all can kind of talk about this, but allowing you a big chunk of time at the beginning to answer them, and then at the end being able to discuss. But feel free to talk that out. Also, just reminding you that this exercise may bring up difficult feelings, and just coming always back to taking care of yourself. Share only what you feel comfortable sharing, and only go as deep as you need to go. Like, there's a lot underneath this. This is a quick workshop, and so if it feels better to kind of stay on the surface with your spiral, do that. You can always come back to this by yourself, with a partner, in a different group setting. But yeah, just being mindful of that. And then when we come back together, there will maybe time for a few folks to share about their experience, but please use the breakout rooms as your primary place to share and receive support. So these are the questions. If you want to take a screenshot of this, or write this down, because we're about to move into our group, our breakout rooms, feel free. I'll leave this up, but I think once we go into our breakout rooms, you won't have access to this. All right. Yeah, so I'd love to hear from y'all, and I just closed, I don't know why I did that. I just closed my chat in my other computer, so I can't read them. So maybe Dana, you can read if people respond to this, but I'd love to just hear, what was that like for you? Any takeaways to share? And again, just kind of snippets if that's accessible. But yeah, I really enjoyed my group so much, and just kind of the things that were able to be named. I know it was really short. And again, this was just to kind of give you a taste of what this can be like. But yeah, anything you feel like sharing in the chat. And Dana, maybe just read off like 5 to 7 people's.
Sure, no problem. Okay, so it was really nice to connect with folks and see similarities. I'd love to work on question 3 onward with a group of druids over coffee. It was lovely to connect with the group. It's nice to see that there are others that care about the same issues that I feel overwhelmed about. It's nice to not feel isolated. Yeah, I hope these conversations can be ongoing in our Discord and forum. My takeaway is there's something I can do at my level and can influence others to make positive changes as well. The more we work together, the bigger the impact.
Awesome. Yeah, so I guess before I jump to that slide, that is my hope, again, in sort of introducing some of this stuff. Maybe some of y'all are familiar with Active Hope or the work that reconnects. I think it's a beautiful tool to come back to individually, with one-on-one, in a group setting, because it's ever evolving, and we rushed through it just for the sake of packing in a lot of information, but there's so much richness there. So I want to kind of touch on a few things, like where do we go from now? And so again, I'm going to share this as a resource, but all of these, this is not an extensive list, but there's some really cool stuff already out there that is creating community conversations, movement, support around what we're facing with climate change. So just to kind of touch on these briefly, climate cafes, these are held in different spaces, but I know that the Climate Psychology Alliance, that they host these for folks. You can be trained to be a climate cafe facilitator. You don't have to be any mental health professional, just a person that's interested. But that's a great way, again, to kind of create spaces. I could see that being maybe creating, taking some tools from there and bringing that to AODA. Good Grief Network, again, is it's a 10-week program that helps to create support around this issue. This one does charge a fee, but I think that they give discounts to groups. And so again, this could be something as an organization, if you were interested in having more training around this in-house, this is a pretty cool one as well. These two are connected, the Work That Reconnects and Active Hope, these links, but touch on a little bit different. Active Hope, as I was saying, offers free training. They have this like 6 or 7 week intensive free training that is so informative, so helpful. That's where I got all of my information, kind of the last part of our talk today. Highly recommend that. All We Can Save project, that's based on a book of essays, and they have a lot of amazing resources. And same with Force of Nature, so many great resources, things to learn, all of that. I want to offer questions here in just a minute, but here's my information. Again, Dana has this as well. I'm happy to be a resource or answer questions, any of that. But yeah, I'm going to stop sharing my screen and open it up to, it's 9:10:01, wherever you are, and open it up if anyone has any questions. I'm happy to answer for a few minutes.